So we talk about like what the purpose of the company is, and it's really revolution. It's revolutionize industry, revolutionize automation. We're here to innovate and help have that kind of impact. And so, yeah, we've been doing distribution for the longest time. We're doing consulting engineering for, really in a big way in the last handful of years. But it's like, that's what we want to do, is help bring the industry into the future. And so there's different ways to do that besides the way that we contribute in sort of helping people with software, bringing new technology. We've got stuff in the labs that's like helping with, CI/CD tools, a lot of stuff that just came out of our practices, right? Like we figured out how to do this because we needed it for the work that we were doing. Like it might be useful to others. There's different business expressions of that kind of innovation and work that we want to do.
Welcome back to the Manufacturing Come Up. I'm Malachi Greb, your host here at the Manufacturing Come Up, where we talk about careers, career advice, how to navigate your career. And today we have a pretty awesome guest, David Nichols with Loop, which is a super cool brand, super cool company that does somewhat similar work that we do, but also very, very different work than what we do. Welcome, David.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. You probably have one of the coolest robotic brand companies on the market.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. We started doing, we've been around for a long time. Like I founded the company in 2007, but it was only 3-4 years ago that we really started to learn what a brand was and what it meant and how it worked. And, I think 5 years ago, I had my thought was, we need marketing. That was what I knew. That was like what I understood. And as I started to learn about that topic and collaborate with a lot of really awesome communication professionals, it's just been really fun to be able to express ourselves in the way that's true and real, and also really vivid and fun. And a lot of our brand and stuff that we do is like, the more kind of delighted and badass it seems, the more successful we'll be. Like that was a nice surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to that, did you have much marketing knowledge or experience?
No, absolutely not. Like I'm an engineer. That's how I started my career, and I have an engineering degree. That's how I was trained. And so and like a lot of engineering companies or a lot of, kind of workshop type of companies, like we were good engineers. Like we're great engineers. And so that was how we came into exist. That was how people knew us. We didn't know how to talk about that. Like, in
Right.
fact, I didn't even realize that there were people who could, understand what you were up to and help you communicate it better. It's like, how could somebody communicate what we do better than us? But yeah, they can. You talk for 5 hours and they give you 3 sentences. You're like, how did you do that? So that was really cool. That was really cool to work with people like that and kind of learn the power of that and how that works.
How did you go about finding the individuals to help you with that?
Really just extreme trial and error and trying to do other things that led us to that, right? Like I think when we were ambitious, and as I started to try to grow the company, I was like, I think we need sales. Like that was what I thought was what we needed next.
Right.
And we did need sales, and we did do sales. Like that was kind of my second job that I learned besides being an engineer. But before we could really express ourselves, before we had really a handle on how to communicate what we're doing and like what we're about, like if you don't have that, it's hard to sell. It's really hard to sell if you don't have that dialed. And so we tried that really hard. And I was talking to people, and we worked a lot on sales type of things, which again I consider to be different, yet another skill.
Yeah.
But I just led to people who were like, it could help to tell figure out how to tell your story. And we just got connected to people that helped us do that and helped us really write down what our values were, what our core values were, and use that as the messaging of the company. And that was all true. All that stuff is true, right? It was there the whole time, but we didn't have we didn't have the words.
Yeah. So, you didn't communicate it in the proper way. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Or I'd take 2 hours to talk about it. People like, I had no idea what they were talking about. They seemed excited. They seemed passionate, but right. That's what it was like back then. So to have people see and understand what we're doing, or at least be interested in it, and to get that kind of feedback is really great. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that's kind of a struggle with going through that process is like finding the individuals who are actually to the skill level to really help you like refine like what your message is. And I feel like with you guys, with like your brand message, your brand image, like not, not only like do you have a good message, it's like it just has like a very creative vibe about it, right? It's like a very, and like to be able to get that, like I don't know if your company had that type of vibe prior to going through this marketing this marketing process, but I think that definitely like the coaching helped define that and help I don't know, just make that messaging so creative.
Well, thank you. And it really was a bit of both, right? But before, I would say like in the old times, like the kind of creativity was there, or like that was really what was driving the company, right? Like innovation, revolution, like that was real.
Mm-hmm.
And we were excited about that. But that felt sort of like, oh, that's just fun. That's just like almost like a guilty pleasure, right? Like I'm playing with this stuff is sort of like, I shouldn't really be doing this. This is unprofessional.
Yeah.
But when we really dug down to it, it's like, no, that's the essence of what we're about. Like,
Yeah.
And so even like going through the communication exercise was like, oh, it's our job to be magicians. It's our job to be creative. That's the most important job, is to like be learning and discovering and exploring, and so it actually taught us to be better at it, right? Like we can embrace that. We could do it on purpose because we're like, oh, right, that's how this works. Like, this is what we're about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't just like, it for sure was like, we can express it better, but we could also be it better. Right. Like that was, and so to really lean into that and to say like, oh yeah, this kind of weird experiment is, we would joke about it. Like, it's like marketing budget, but it's real. It's real, it's like, let's put a chainsaw on a robot and do that. Like, that's a legitimate brand investment. That's like, you know what I mean? It's both professional and creative and fun.
Yeah.
So it did help us to be it better. It transformed the company in that way too. It's, it went from being like, it felt like what was like a guilty pleasure side gig to like, that's what it's all about. And embracing that was really powerful, really powerful.
Yeah. I would assume like kind of going through that process, like one of the major value adds that you got was just like being able to embrace that and be like, oh, okay. Like,
yeah,
I think there's definitely like an underlying part of like the content and the stuff you're doing. It was just already in your nature. It was just like you guys weren't like maybe making videos on it, or maybe you just weren't, expressing it to the public.
No, I mean, we were able to like really tap into that and really unleash it, like, and to your point, I think it was there because that's how, at 25 people were like, yeah, cool. Like, run our whole program. It's like, they saw that in us, or we had that in us to be able to do that. And also, even further, like I was lucky. I grew up, with my parents. My dad was an engineer at Caterpillar his whole career. So, he's like technical, he's like professional, like he retired as an executive, like he's deep in, engineering world. We lived in different places all over the world. Like, he was really successful as an engineer and professional. And my mom was an art teacher, like a 1970s art teacher. So it's like, oh, by the way, here's also finger paints and hot glue guns. And like, here's how to make. So it's like, to be able to, that's also like, you can see it in the company now. It's like, it's both. It's the technical elements, the engineering aspects are really critical, but also it's like, what if we turn this upside down? Like, what if we completely change how this was done? Like, a lot of that creativity was stuff that I had been taught, like, again, accident. Like, I didn't realize that's what I was bringing. That's what was in me for the longest time. I mean, I did go to engineering school, and I was like, I feel different from a lot of these engineers who are like, doing mounds of paperwork and like interested more purely in the technical dimensions and kind of like, making, those are important, right? Like, that's why airplanes don't fall out of the sky. But like, in terms of making new stuff, like that was stuff that we were passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to make things look better too, not just make things that are structurally sound, but make them where they cosmetically look good as well.
Yeah, totally. And just having the kind of experience of making new things about like, no, we can try this, even if it's rough, or even if it's like, there's something we can pursue and try it and scrap it, try it and scrap it, try it and scrap it. Like, that's what creative or artist types do. And engineers too, but like some, there's a range of kind of engineering stuff. It's like, are we doing structural validations, or, are we figuring out like, what if we made stuff out of, CLT instead of steel? Like, those are the kind of like different kind of innovation approaches. And yeah, that's been there the whole time.
Taking this thing back, what do you think was part of what made you start Loop?
I think it was that passion for, I guess growing up and, for sure that like childhood influence of like engineering, not just my dad, but like, I could handfuls of other close family members and, engineer lineage, right? Like since forever. Yeah. So it's like, oh, I guess I'm an engineer. That was one thing. And then also that creativity aspect, but I would just like building stuff, like the stuff that I was getting into, even when I was like 15, I was like building levels in Quake for Quake, and like, this is cool. I remember my mom getting like concerned I was playing video games too much. And she came into the room and she was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm building virtual worlds to run around and play video games. And she's like, okay, you're fine. Like she didn't bug me after that, because she could see like, oh, he's basically doing architectural CAD software, like for fun.
Yeah. And so like, recognize that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so getting involved in, being interested in technology and software and programming, and, that was just what had gotten me into what I was doing. And especially when I went to school, and like, I might've become a software engineer, but like when I came to the program, I went to University of Illinois, and it was called general engineering at the time. I think it's called ISC now, industrial and systems engineering. It's a really interesting program because it's like a really multidisciplinary. It's like you learn all the dimensions, which is like really valuable for mechatronics automation. You need to know electrical, mechanical software. And so I just like, oh, I can write code. And then when I hit enter, like this thing is just going to start moving and doing something. Like to be able to build software and work in digital systems that were like operating in the physical world. Like that's what hooked me for sure. And it was, making whether it's like making robots dance or like putting bottles into boxes, it's like that's just so cool. I was just like so fascinated by that.
Yeah, I remember that my first time walking into like a manufacturing facility where there were robots and like linear servo slides, and I'm just like, I walked in, I'm like, I don't know, I feel like I just walked in an amusement park. I was like, this is
yeah, totally. How do I get involved? How do I get in front of that? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what did you say your discipline was in the more the programming side of things?
Well, I think so. Like, I mean that like when I was 18, I was like taking AP computer science classes, and I was like really interested in that. But I also just had that experience of like building stuff and making things, and kind of to put them together was really what I was like, oh, I can put these two together. Like that's what hooked me. So, and I did go to like a Big 10 engineering school. I took that track, but that, and there's trade-offs to that. I mean, they're like, we'll just teach you the fundamental physics and then you can apply it anywhere. And it's like, yeah, but they don't tell you, I never heard what a PLC was until I was, in my 20s.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we'll just teach you these fundamentals about, and then you can just figure out how to apply it. Whereas, more, there's others, like we have a handful of people on our team from CSU Chico where it's like more practical. They like teach you mechatronics, and they're like, here's a motion controller, here's a servo drive. Like I'd never seen any of that stuff until I came out of school, but they had taught me all the fundamentals. Here's moments of inertia, here's all this like deep control theory stuff. Like I knew it, but it's like I didn't have any application. It took me until after school to learn how it was all applied.
Yeah, I feel like especially in the past, like there was, especially with like actual engineering degree programs, like there was very, very little of like real world experience with stuff like PLCs and robots, and actually like programs that were available were more of like even your community college. They were kind of falling more under like the trades type of work.
Technician trades, you're electrician plus. Yeah, at that point, I was lucky to have come into it that way. And it lends a lot of point of view. Like a lot of stuff that you see from Loop now is because it's like from coming up more from a software engineering, like with software engineering interest, right? Like, I had all that experience. Like I was writing C++ code when I was 17, because I was taking AP computer science, and it's like, I know how to use an IDE. And coming into the automation world where there's like all these different evolutionary pathways, it's like there's PLC world. It's like when I bumped into, like, it was a couple, like year or two into my career, like almost right out of college, I bumped into the B&R platform, B&R Industrial Automation. And I opened it up. I was like, oh, this is an IDE. Like, I know how to use this. It's got a C compiler in it. Like, I can do whatever. I know how to use this. Like, I've been programming TI DSPs, and like I've been doing all that, and coming more from embedded software point of view.
Yeah.
And that was my like way into the world of PLCs. And it was like, I had never heard of Rockwell automation.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was. I had to learn about BNR before that. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, and there've been trade-offs to that. Like, it's been really powerful. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we've been doing. We've been using Git for 10 years on all of our automation projects. Now, it's just like something that people are just kind of waking up to. So it's cool. I think that stuff is coming together in really interesting ways. And that was basically where I was coming from.
Yeah. I think it's like super powerful. I think that realistically, like, majority of your PLC programmers, like if you're looking to get an edge, it's to take some type of like computer programming, because in my opinion, like, computer programming is more complex and it's more powerful in ways. But the one part of it that can be a little bit more simplistic is, like, in my opinion, is the way that it scans. You can like visually see like kind of how your code is going to execute versus like when you go into PLC, that was one of my biggest disconnects that took me a long time to really grasp. That I was like, okay, how does it scan this host side and then output on this host side? Like, I just, you know what I mean? And so and when you don't have a fundamental understanding of programming, which I didn't at the point in time, it was kind of hard to connect the dots. And then I started doing like some robot programming too. And I was like, oh, this robot programming is way easier because it's
more scripting.
More scripting. And so I think that fundamental like really helps with being able to transfer it to other.
And I think in automation, like, one thing I'm actually really, really excited about, or like I see as kind of a persistent thread, is, you have a lot of professionals that have been doing it for a while, like a lot of like the community of people that work on controls, technicians, ladder logic programmers, like this whole thing. It's like I think there's a subtlety in like, it's, programming, or even, people talk about text-based languages being seen as more complex. And it's like, I would rather people use the word unfamiliar, because if you look at like, if you look at people that are in the software world, or you look at like coding boot camps, you got people that's like, we had an applicant, and I was like so ready to hire her. She's like, I used to be a beekeeper, and then I took a coding boot camp, and now I like write JavaScript front ends. And I was like, right, you learned that in 12 weeks, and it's just like, there's a whole world of accessible programming, and again, my background would be like, I learned making web pages, or I learned how to do, I was just learning these other tools, or even learning like Rails and other stuff, where it's like, you do need some fundamentals, but there's also like really easy on-ramps for a lot of software stuff. And it doesn't take a software engineering or CS degree to be an effective builder of software in 2023, right? Like, you can learn so much just by like, just jump on and go do like coding exercises, right? Just Google like how to learn JavaScript, and you're like, you're already like 90% of the way there. You don't need to know all this crazy stuff about pointers and memory. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine, but you know what I mean? Like, there is really easy on-ramps. And, I think one of the things I'm excited about is like, how do we get those people over here and teach them enough about machines to be effective, right? Because the UIs and HMIs that those people coming out of coding boot camps can make are killer compared to anything I've seen on, on a touch screen in my career.
Industrial platform.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I think and also too, like with the programming side of things, there's so much more accessible information on like YouTube for like writing code, like PC-based code, versus like trying to find like ladder logic, where so you can like really understand and learn fundamentals of programming and learn how to debug things and get used to that process.
Totally. I mean, there's so much. I mean, again, I had a lot of background, and I had a lot of experience, but still, it's like Google and Stack Overflow. It's like, if you just, whatever programming area you're seeing, you just like type in exactly, as messy as you want, just type into Google's like, boom, here's your answer. Here's 100 upvotes on this being correct. You're like, oh, okay. And it's like, how are you going to, you're not going to get that from the industrial world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and another thing that's really cool too, like with like what's available on the market, is like, my kids are pretty young. We have like 6 kids, so.
Oh hell yeah! Congrats, man. Good luck.
Thank you. And like they're all from the ages of like 4 to like 9 right now, and especially the older ones, I'm getting them involved in a program by MIT called Scratch. There's Scratch and Scratch Junior. And so like those are just really cool. They're like little gamified like programming for kids.
Right. I was a volunteer one day for a first robotics competition, and I was just blown away by these like 10-year-olds coming in, and they're like, yeah, we would have used more sensors. We would have done that. And I'm like looking what they're doing, like, do you want a job? Like, it's like, they're so good and they're 10, you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, they're just having fun making a little car drive around on the track and pick stuff up. But I'm like, you have all the fundamentals you need. You know, you have, you know, you're as good as many of the, you know, packaging machine programmers that I know and respect, right? Like, it's like, it's super cool. And yeah, it's awesome what they have access to. There's just, I don't know, a lot of that I feel like in background in industrial is just like more of like, it's not about the technology. It's just about the culture and kind of like people's familiarity. And, you know, like, it's more of like it's more about like what people's experience is than it is about like how hard the tech is. Like the tech for programming is stuff that, you know, high school kids can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like another thing, I mean, it's kind of like off topic a little bit, but like some of the things that are cool with like being able to do like wireless modules, and like let's say for instance for like kids, and like they want to do like build little cars and maybe a whole team of them, and you could like put like a wireless module on there with like some remote IO, and then like wirelessly communicate to that remote IO to like a PLC that's over here. You gotta have all this.
They got servos, they got sensors. Yeah. No, it's totally cool. It's totally good. Again, like it's not. I'm not fully off the deep end. You know, like I don't think you could just like, you know, again, not to pick on Raspberry Pis, but I don't think we should just be like throwing Raspberry Pis into, you know, in critical equipment. But it's like the software tool. There are ways to do legit software tools, or like to incorporate that, or, you know, certainly in the UIs. It's like I just got tired of Pixel pushing all those buttons forever. It's like, you know, CSS is a better way to do that. Period. Right. You know, so it's like that. Those are the kind of things where, you know, there's just a lot of opportunity still to be realized.
Absolutely. So what going back again, did you ever anticipate starting a company and being a business owner? Was that like ever like a thing that was in your mind from the beginning, or how did that transpire?
I think I might be a bit of a smartass, so I think I was suited to like not wanting to be told what to do, and like taught that I could figure anything out, you know. And so I kind of had been, true or not, you know, like, again, I think that's what I was told. And so I think too, like, being into, you know, independent minded, and like I had a lot of experiences growing up of like, I lived overseas, like I mentioned, and I had just had a lot of like interesting experiences, like, oh, like this is all made up. I was really fortunate, like in terms of growing up that way. And so I also, although I was really young, and it's sort of like, well, I don't have a ton of experience and I have no business doing this, I also don't have much to lose. Like, I had an engineering degree, you know, and I was working at a company where they were getting acquired by a bigger company. And so it was like this, like, I didn't initiate that really. It's just sort of like this thing happened. I got a phone call one day and it's like, oh, we're going to be acquired by this other company. And I was like, I don't really think this is for me. This new company was like, not really the, you know, the values and kind of what they were up to. I was like, I'm not feeling this. And so it was like, well, I'll go try this. And, you know, if I crater into the earth in a giant heap of rubble, like I'll probably be able to get a better job, because I'll be like, I tried to start a company and it failed. Here's what I learned. Yeah. And that was like that worst case outcome was actually better than staying at that company for me. You know, I was like, what have I got to lose? You know, I was fortunate to have support and you know, we had I had enough relationships from a year or two of just working that there were people that were willing to hire us and work with us. So that was like, you know, it's much harder for me to imagine now at, you know, age 40 with 2 kids, and, you know, like to take that kind of risk would be way more difficult, because there's just so much more at stake.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like for like me, like, you know, it would definitely be extremely hard if like ever like elite automation didn't survive. And like, because like now it's definitely defined like in my brain that like I'm an entrepreneur, I'm always going to be a business owner. Like, you know, that's been defined in my head. On the flip side, like, you know, I've always not been like a super confident person, right? So I could be like don't get me wrong, I could have my times where I'm kind of like cocky and I can do this and I'm one of the best at doing whatever I do. I'm really good at execution. That's one thing I'm really good at.
Sure.
But by starting a company, it gave me the confidence, like where like say for instance, I could never see myself like sitting at an executive level, especially without me gaining like 10 or 20 more years of experience.
Yeah.
Maybe at that point I'd reach that comfort level. But like starting a company and just like the things that I've been able to operate and do and experience that like, it's distilled like a confidence within me that like now I know that like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to like, if ever I was go work for a company, like I'd be like, maybe I don't know what I'm going to do for your company, but I know I can do things and make some things shake.
Yeah, totally. And to have that kind of mentality, I mean, especially in a discipline, or like, it's not exactly a trade, but just like even engineering, to be like, as long as I'm a good engineer, I'll keep getting more work. The reward for good work is more work. As you build your reputation, there's more people that are like, hey, you should talk to so-and-so, you should talk to Loop about that. That's like a totally great way to, get into entrepreneurship and build a business. Because it's a practice, right? It's a profession.
I think another thing to like individuals who are kind of like on the fence of like starting a company or not, like one of the things that was the one of the breaking points for me is I was working for a company. There was a lot of mistakes being made, and like I was just like seeing these things. A lot of things were like out of my control, or there were things like I advised against, and then the things still happen. And I'm like, okay, cool. So if we're gonna be dealing with all these issues and have to deal with all these headaches, like might as well just do it on my own, right? Like,
right. I might as well all the screw ups be my fault instead. That's different. It's a different kind of thing. I got a different attitude about problems that I created versus ones that were handed to me. Yeah, and what I like about it, it's just like the variety of skill sets. Like I still love engineering and building stuff and designing things. Like, and that's my fundamental passion about what I'm doing professionally. But in the meantime, I mentioned like you got to learn how to do sales. You got to learn enough about accounting. Like I just want to learn about everything, right? Like I went to general engineering, where I was like, teach me all the engineerings. Like why would I pick just one? So like entrepreneurship is just another example of that, even broader, where it's like you got to figure out all these other dimensions. Like I just love learning about that stuff. So and talk about marketing. It's like I guess I need to learn how to do this, right? Like I gotta learn how to do video editing. Like there's so many opportunities to just like learn different things, or that you either need to survive or just like to help your business. Like there's a lot of freedom in that I really appreciate versus just like stay in your lane.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also like a version of like forced learning. Like you said, sometimes like you need to learn to survive. And it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting learning this thing today, but I guess
no, totally. And I love that too. It's like, I've got a lot of respect for people who, and I know people who are great engineers that, went more of an academic track and they've got PhDs in like amazing robotics, whatever. I'm like, I learned on the streets, I learned out in the world, and like that, it's a different kind of learning, to kind of do it out in the real world, or, not to diminish, but again, it's like out
it's
in
like, learning.
It's a different kind of thing. It's like, I just had I did have an engineering degree, but I don't have any other like professional education, just more like I got to learn by doing. I like that a lot.
I think that creates like two different types of individuals, where like you have like the people who are more academic, maybe they're more like analytical, maybe they'll like, make more analyzed decisions to some degree. And then you have the other side where it's like, well, I just do things, and then when they don't work, I do it again.
Right. I mean, entrepreneurship, I think we can really distinguish in that way from academic or like more corporate context, where it's like there's just a giant machine, and you're a part of it. Maybe one day I'll do that, but what I also like is like the ability to build it into what you want. If there aren't many places or contexts professionally where you would have that much say over the direction of what it is. You're like, I don't want to do this anymore. My heart's not like, I'm going to change this into this other thing. Like there's probably 3 or 4 pivotal moments in our history where it was like, let's go this direction now, and we were able to make that choice, not easy, usually, but I'd rather do that than be stuck someplace. Yeah.
I'm actually kind of curious, like with like, and I'm trying to like be in the mind of somebody who's like maybe thinking about starting a company, and like, whenever like starting Loop, did you already kind of have defined what Loop was, or like how did Loop kind of start, and like what was like the business model behind it initially?
I mean, initially in the foundation, I mean, even to this day, like I when I came out of college, I worked for a distribution company, like a motion control component house kind of place. They would call themselves like a high tech automation distributor, right? And so, you know, I was learning to do sales, and I was an applications engineer. I was working with like servo drives and motion controls and, you know, linear guides, all this kind of like servo kind of motion heavy stuff. That was how I got into B&R, because they picked up the B&R line as a channel partner, as a distributor. And I was like, oh, this stuff is great. And I sort of like took that on and became the expert of that as like the apps guy, and like also helping a lot in sales of like talking about that platform. And so when that company exited, or when they got acquired, I had those connections to B&R, and they're like, if you want to start something, like, we'll support you, we'll help you. You can have the, you know, you can have the channel, or you can be the channel. And again, it was like me and Carl, the two of us. And again, I think they must have seen, you know, I think back and be like, man, they must have been really desperate to have done that for me, you know, like they must not have had better options. But we were also really passionate about what we were doing. I think they could see the potential in what we were doing with the product. And that was how I got started enough, you know, again, really low personal overhead. I had, you know, I wasn't making that much money at the time. I didn't have much to give up. So it's like, as long as we have a couple customers that are, you know, buying from us or hiring us, we can exist, you know, and then it's just like figuring it out, you know. And so I think so much about it is just like, how do I get a little foothold on something in order to get, you know, to be able to be cash flow positive, you know, like I'm not going to, I can survive, you know, at every step is sort of like, okay, let's run some experiment. What if we tried this, you know, and just building bit by bit that way, like was, you know, again, why we were able to survive that whole time. And even when stuff came up, like we weren't dependent on really other people for like staying alive. You know, we had clients, we had customers. That was so important. And just like being able to learn and make mistakes along the way, like that was always the goal. And there were times where it'd be like really tempting, be like, we could grow faster, or maybe we take investment money, or, you know, like I lived in San Francisco for the longest time. I'd see companies make like a PowerPoint and they'd be given $20 million. And be like, I would love to do that. I'd love to hire 100 people and have them do what I want. But it was always like maintaining that independence, and just, you know, because that money's going to boom, 18 months later, you got to do that again. It's like, it's not, you know what I mean? Like, that's not, to me, it was never sustainable, you know? So it's always about like, how can I first and foremost, like, continue to do it, you know, like that. For the longest time, that was the success criteria. It was not like I'm making a ton of money, or I'm like super successful, or like have freedom or whatever. It's like, and it's hard work, but it's like, we're still a company. Like, that was what I say for like 5 or 10 years. I was like, we're still doing it. Like, that was like, it was true for me that was like, that was my criteria. It was like, I don't have to go back and get a regular job. Thank God. That was enough. It's still enough. Yeah.
So you kind of have like that same mentality of like, I'm a business owner. I can't go back to like doing anything but like business owning.
Yeah. Or I want to. Yeah. I mean, there's different things that I want to do with the company now, but like, yeah. And sometimes I think like, maybe I should go work for a giant company here that has major robot aspirations. Like, I might be able to make more money, but I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, the freedom and independence is always really important to me. Super important to me. And so, yeah, it's been nice. Yeah. And luckily being able to grow the company and learn a ton to be able to get it to where it is now is like, yeah, really, really a dream come true.
Yeah. I think like definitely one thing, like going back into like the creative aspect of what you guys are doing and what you've accomplished. Like, I mean, obviously like you guys have been around quite a bit longer, but you know, I kind of have like a vision of like, just doing more innovative things, right? So like, I'm going to dive into a little bit of like kind of, you know, our game plan and whatnot, but like, you know, Elite Automation essentially in the beginning is just becoming an extremely profitable machine that then we can do other things with, right? So like that way, Elite Automation is the funding behind whatever the thing is that we actually want to do. And like,
totally,
I don't put a lot of conversation into it and a lot of energy into it, but like my goal is not even Elite Automation as a whole. Like, I want to grow Elite Automation to be one of the biggest companies in the world, but it really doesn't have anything to do with like Elite Automation becoming the biggest company in the world. It's like, what can the dollars that it generate do to like doing more creative things, doing things for education, like really just being able to be the funder to all these other auxiliary things.
Yeah, and I think of it that way too, and I think of it at any scale. Like a lot of thinking about creativity or entrepreneurship, like even when we were three people, would be like, what can we afford to sort of set aside as like our experimentation budget,
Mm.
And it might be like, well, there's one night per month when I'm going to play around with learning Ruby on Rails. Like it might be a technology. It might be like, I'm going to try and play around with this and see what happens. I got really excited when iPads started coming out. I'd be like, this is such a better touch screen. Like, why don't we use these? I'm like, so I'm playing with stuff on the side, right?
Yeah.
Got the core business, it's running. I'm working a ton of whatever I can afford to sort of skim off in terms of time and money and set aside, even if it's $100, $1,000. I mean, now the numbers are bigger for Loop because we have a bigger business, right?
Yeah.
And we want to grow and sustain it. But like, if you look at what we're doing with like labs, we have labs function in our company that's like, it's very intentionally like experimental work, and like 99% of the time, like what we spend like is a failure in the sense of like, we put in this much money and like, whatever, nothing happened. But like we learned something, it sent us in a new direction. We're like finding our way. And I'm confident that the stuff that we're working on there's something we're going to stumble across, be like, boom, there's another giant business that comes out of that. It's a different kind of thinking, and so whatever you can afford to kind of, as your little side bets, that gets bigger as the company gets bigger. If we can grow our distribution business, if we can grow our consulting engineering business, like that's just more resources that we can play with, to kind of skim off and try to make new things, which is really what it's about.
One thing I really like that I think, obviously I haven't seen deeply into your company, like everything that's going on, but like, at least from like an outside perspective, it seems like you guys do a good job of like, I'll just say the word tithing a certain amount, right?
Yeah, right. No, that's a good word. I've never thought of that word in that context, but yeah, it's like, it's innovation tithing.
Yeah, exactly. But like, it seems like you've done like a very good job, like implementing that, like as you're going along. That's like, it don't matter if it's like we've made $10 today, we'll still give $1 to doing that R&D thing.
Yeah, totally. And again, it's always like what we can afford and still survive. You know what I mean? So it might have been, $1,000 at one point. It might have been $10,000, maybe 100,000, 400,000, whatever that is that you can skim off, because it's like, that's more like for, tithing or betting on like stuff. And again, it's not wasteful. It's like, it's actually makes sense. It's just different than running the core company. It's more high risk, high reward. And again, it's not high risk on purpose. It's just like, well, if this works, it's going to be super valuable. Like that. And it's different than we're going to do, and I still love our core business of like, we're going to do a sprint, we're going to sell engineering services, and like, we'll work for those 2 months and they will give us X amount of dollars. Like, do that. Like for sure. It's really valuable. It's aligned with our work. It's making us better engineers. Like, it helps us grow the team. It gives us new resources. Like, that's what's sustaining everything.
Yeah.
And then what can we also do? Because even our consulting engineering, our controls software integrator, Shipping 6, like it wasn't a meaningful amount of income even 5 or 6 years ago, and then all of a sudden it's like, 100,000, 500,000, it's like doubling. And it's like, oh, this is real. Like, in fact, this is like this might be the biggest part of our company right now.
Yeah.
Like it didn't exist 6 years ago, and we've been around for 16 years.
Yeah.
So that's why we would do new stuff. It's like that,
you stumble
foundation. It grew naturally. It grew naturally from running those kind of experiments.
Yeah, like that's kind of like a little bit of like what drove us into like really targeting towards like robotic welding and weld fixturing and those type of things is like, one, we had like the capability side from like the engineers that we've hired, but then like, they were pushing that, right? And I was completely kind of against it because I came from more of like the material handling side of things, like vision applications, things like that. And in this just the company itself shifted. It said, no, we're good at this. Like, okay, whatever, we'll try it, right? And then it just went like really successful.
Right. People keep asking us to do it. It'd be like, maybe we should say yes. Like that. That's like, there's a lot of stuff like that at Loop right now where it's like, are we going to keep saying no? Like, why? It's like that parable, the guy stuck on the roof in a flood and he's sending the canoe and the helicopter. And we'd be like, get in, do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that what we were talking about earlier about like being able first of all, to survive,
Mm-hmm.
right? First of all, we're going to be able to sustain ourselves, because then you just keep hanging around, and like those opportunities show up, and that's when you jump on that. Like if you go to, there's a certain risk, on the one hand, we're like, we have this super risky activity. On the other hand, we have this like super stable, super solid, really insanely robust like part too. And it's like, no matter what, we'll be able to live, to fight another day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, like, I mean, for like, especially like, when companies like struggling and stuff like that, they're like, if you can just survive to fight that another day,
Yeah.
then it, you don't know what door or opportunity, like, I get a perfect example of this would be like, if I decided to shut my doors today, and then, 2 weeks from now, we was about to win the biggest purchase order we would ever won. You know what I mean? It was like an optimal fit project, but you don't know until like, or if you close the doors too early, then you never know that you're going to reach that point.
Yeah. Step one, don't die. Right. Step zero. Like, and then you can be irresponsible on top of that. That's kind of the game, and just knowing which is which and not getting them confused.
Yeah. What are some of your goals and thoughts for Loop's future and where you guys plan on going?
Yeah. What comes to mind for me, and what I talked about, like, people see the brand stuff that we're doing, and when we really worked on that, one of the things that we were talking about was like, what's the purpose of the company, right? Why does this company exist? Because we start off, we're a distribution channel. It's like, is our purpose to drop ship cardboard boxes full of fancy electronics? Is that why we exist? It's like, well, that's how we make money. That's our business model. That's not why we're here. So we talk about like what the purpose of the company is, and it's really revolution. It's revolutionize industry, revolutionize automation. We're here to innovate and help, have that kind of impact. And so, yeah, we've been doing distribution for the longest time. We're doing consulting engineering for, really in a big way in the last handful of years. But it's like, that's what we want to do, is help bring the industry into the future. And so there's different ways to do that, right? Besides the way that we contribute in sort of helping people with software, bringing new technology, we've got stuff in the labs that's like helping with, CI/CD tools, a lot of stuff that just came out of our practices, right? Like, we figured out how to do this because we needed it for the work that we were doing. Like, it might be useful to others. Like, maybe we make that into a product. Like, there's different business expressions of that kind of innovation and work that we want to do. We played around with, even just for marketing purposes, like, hey, we made this cool camera robot. Like, that's an example of like, and there's other camera robot companies, but maybe we have something to offer there, that because it's aligned with like, we're bringing this new technology to places where it's valuable and interesting and it's fun, So again, it's kind of a broad answer, but it's really the purpose-driven answer is like, if it's about that, then we're like all in. Hell yeah. If that's what we're aligned. If you want to do that, then we're aligned, like, let's work together.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I mean, and we're also just like growing a ton in terms of really bringing that software engineering mindset to PLCs and controls, like I used to be more like, I guess evangelical, let's say, about like, let's do this, like, people need to change. And it's like, no, I've softened that. Like, I'm not fire breathing in that to that degree anymore. I'm just like, whoever else agrees, like, let's do this. Like, so there's people like, Jacob with his Twin Cat channel, and, other people who are like, yeah, maybe they work with different platforms or whatever, but it's like, we see the same thing. Like, let's help each other out. Like, that's a core part of like what we're doing with Ship and Six. It's just like, we're doing so, we're using Git, we're doing code reviews. Like, we're doing all that stuff that they do in software engineering, but for controls. And that's something I'm super passionate about expanding. I think there's a huge opportunity there, it still hasn't been done.
I mean, this is a space that I'm not super familiar with, and I don't even know like how much of a market's already there or not, but like, how many like PC based things that we could do that like also like interface with like a PLC to where like you could have like a PLC programmer write code, but that then easily links, like the equivalency of like linking an Allen Bradley PLC with a Fanuc robot. That same equivalency and being able to link them and have them communicate, like do with a PC-based user interface that like gives you some really cool tool on that side.
Boundaries are blurring like crazy. Like B&R's been, B&R's been talking about, you want to run that code on a PLC, you want to run on a PC, it's the same code, same IDE, same tools, same ladder logic. And that, those distinctions are really blurring, and they're going to continue to blur. It's like, is that an industrial PC or a PLC? It's like, we don't care. Like it's the same, it's the same stuff. We still got a real-time operating system. We're still talking to servo drives doing motion control with it. Like those are things where, let's really leverage what's really important about industrial stuff, like reliability, robustness, like the kind of things that people expect from a PLC. But then, by the way, bring all this new PC tech to it. Like, I don't really believe in the IT OT distinction. Like I think it's a big blurry line, and we need to, there's a huge opportunity to take advantage of both elements and really merge them. Like they, again, I know there's going to be diehards on both sides that like don't want to overlap it, or they kind of like kind of religious battles. But like it's like I don't think we need to look at it that way. Like there's obviously something important about both elements.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you kind of envision that Loop at any point in time will either create like a product or like a software package that'll be like, maybe it's something that like it goes mass industry, where it's something that gets implemented to a huge portion of the industry?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's in line with the vision, right? Like, let's revolutionize automation. Like, we can when we started, we were revolutionizing by selling a particular control platform in 2.5 states, and it's like, what, as we started to get involved, certainly when we're doing marketing and we're meeting people like you, and we're making connections like all over the country, all over the world, it's like, these are our peers. Like, these are the people we want to work with. Like, what we need to look like to work with that, right? Even our controls engineers, like we just started hiring all over the country, because it's like, we're building everything in digital twins. We're doing everything like, so much we can do offsite. There's so much we're building just like offline. And so it doesn't matter where you live anymore. Like that's even our core businesses like are benefiting from that, more broad geography. And it's interesting because, we have people where it's like, they never expected that they could be a controls engineer and work remote, because they got to live on site or they got to live in front of the machine. And, to be able to maintain your community connections and live where you want to live for the reasons that you have, your family, whatever that is, it's like, hell yeah, like do that and work for Loop wherever you are. And so, in terms of product, like, I mean, I should mention too, like we've been building a CI/CD tool, continuous integration, continuous deployment tool, which is a common software engineering practice of, checking your code in to the servers, and it just like puts it out to every machine. Like that's a totally common practice. Like if you go to the Amazons of the world, you go to even just like any like software engineering kind of web service kind of deployment, like that's how it works. They're not updating their servers with USB sticks. They're not sitting in a data center. And there's techniques to do it safely, effectively, and help you ship faster. And it's like, why don't we do that on a machine? So we built a tool to do that called Shove, SHUV. Is that shove.team? I hope I got that right. And it works on BNR right now, but like we'll bring it to other places probably, because it's like everybody ought to use that tool. We know people doing that. Why don't we no one's making it? Why don't we make it? We know how to do that. Or we can learn.
I'm not sure if it comes in our lifetime. I mean, it'll be
I'm a little optimistic in that. No, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. I just want you our lifetime.
Because different topic. But I think that at some point in time, the thing is, there's gonna be competition between brands, which will be the challenge, right?
Yeah.
But like one thing I really envision is like it's probably going to end up being like a software overlay that's able to kind of write in one interface, and then it develops the code for all the different platforms. So like if it's you can write the code in one platform. It also writes it for Alan Bradley, also writes it for Omron. And then like what I'm seeing is like equipment becoming much more common, right? So there's not either there's not differences, or there's like more like, let's say, smart devices or Internet of Things. So like say for instance, like something like a servo, like you never train a servo anymore. You plug it in, you hit a button, and then it kind of just does some rotations and does some, amp calculations, and then boom, it automatically knows like what it's connected to. Maybe it travels really slow and then reaches to a spot where it like hard stops, and then just, sees that peak in current and says, okay, there's my hard stop, and travels back the other way, and like doing all the things where it's like software taught equipment is more similar in like we have like engineering practices that equipment is
more standard interfaces, standard networks. Again, people have been talking about it forever, but it's like it's not going to be at the machine level with device net or even Ethernet IP, right? Like we have these amazing networking tools and software tools to make all this stuff coordinate. And, as much as it's important and valuable to have standards like IEC standards for ladder and structured text and stuff like that, everything is still so bundled up and proprietary. It's like you can't transfer it back and forth that easily. If you're trained on one, you can go use this other tool and it has all these other quirks and specific things about it. But, I'm excited by platforms where the software is just naturally more modular and transferable, right? Like B&R has it that way. It's all their, for example, like all their stuff is in like text-based, everything, like the IO configuration, the hardware configurations, everything. And you can just check it into a source control. And if you change it, you can merge it, you can do all this crazy stuff because it's not just some binary blob, right? It's not one binary blob of the whole thing. And so I'm excited about that. There's a lot with TwinCAD and Beckhoff that has that flavor. And you look at platforms like Siemens AX, where they're saying all the right things about like, that's how it will work, and if they're able to do that, a lot of the software is not just going to be better managed across Siemens projects, but across platforms too. Like there's going to be an opportunity to do that, even if it's just application libraries, right? It's like even writing the handler for your air cylinders or something is going to be much more portable than it was in the past.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see, and like this is where I kind of hope that we become like big enough of a company, quick enough to like be able to be one of the ones that like get involved in like some of these like revolutionary things, and like be able to invest, $10 million into like developing a software that can do things like overlay on top of other platforms, or just doing other like partnerships with different individuals, or like maybe go into partnership for other product developments of like, hey, if you can produce this thing, we can do this cool software thing with it and create this like really cool product together.
Yeah, totally. Or like, I've seen integrators do it where they're really skilled. They have like an amazing team of like 100 badass engineers, and they've been doing custom automation. They've been doing lines for big corporations. And then one day they're like, we could make they like package some of that into like more product, and they like do a shift into becoming an OEM, and they just like, that was a ticket for them. They were able to capture that and build that into a product. So they're not just like chasing the next engineering hours. They were able to capture their knowledge and their ability and expertise in a way that it was more scalable, to them. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing, whether that's a particular kind of machine that solves a problem for somebody, or whether it's, a platform or some other piece that a lot of other people use, like there's just more scale there than, one person doing a labor hour.
That's actually like where we've seen the most success. We're like a young company, so we're still like, we don't really have the products in place yet and all that good stuff. So it's like a lot of our success, and like really a part of what's like drove us into robotic welding, and like identifying that and being able to see that as a very, very lucrative business sector for us, is because robotic welding is doing exactly what you just mentioned, which is you get these companies they're doing all these custom robotic welding applications, and then they get to a certain size and they say, okay, we're going to build some products here. We sell 10 different standardized packages, and we don't really want to do custom anymore. Maybe they do some, but like they really have identified like, let's put all our resources towards this product.
Yeah. I mean, we work with ABB, and you can buy a welding cell from them, like out of the box. Again, I don't know about robotic welding because for the same reason I was always told to stay away from robotic welding, because there's a ton of expertise. I was like, okay, I believe you. We'll do other stuff. But like, it's like, how could we package up all this learning in something that's, instead of just doing it custom every time, like, and there's different opportunities. Maybe it's just some little accessory. Maybe it's just some little aspect of robotic welding that you solve that everybody needs, like, it's like getting in the business and building stuff over and over again has a way of like teaching you, or like you learn the patterns, like I think one of the reasons we've been successful with Ship and Six with our controls group is we've got libraries for B&R and software that we built that we've been honing for like 10 or 15 years. And so it's like when we do a project, it's like we're bringing all of that to bear, and it's like the libraries are getting updated. When we update stuff, it goes to every project we ever ship, the library gets updated. It's like that's something that's like still unheard of, but it's like that's IP, that's IP, right? That's how we're able to do what we do. Even though it's just sort of like our software libraries for kind of mundane stuff, whether that's an alarm system or HMI tools. It's just like those are things we built because we needed them, and there's a broad application of it. And there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, and especially like that's one thing like I identified from like the company I came from. It seemed like every application we were doing, it was the application was getting rewritten, even though it was like very similar to another application that we did. And I'm like guys, why are we rewriting this? We've already done this. And actually, like a really fun fact too, and this would go for like anybody who's like a business owner. I think also for like somebody in your position as well, that like whenever you find some cool creative thing that's like pretty revolutionary, to package it up, because like the company that I came from, like they actually had a vision system that was like better than Kantz and Cognex for like years. They were like basically smacking them for like 10 years. And they were winning all kinds of order. I mean, this is why this company was like surviving and thriving the way they were, is because they had this vision system that like it was able to detect things like on inspection that couldn't be detected with like Kantz and Cognex. Like, so it's just, but the downfall was it wasn't packaged well. Every application was being rewritten and hard coded in PC based code. And
I think this maybe touches on more of like it's a business consideration. It's also a technical consideration. Like what I see too, in terms of the quality that you can bring, like what, a lot of stuff that I've seen is like it's written to a fixed bid from scratch each time. Like they're on the clock. They're just desperate to get that last 10% signature released. And they're starting from scratch every time. Like, again, I'm exaggerating only a little bit, but again, when you're working on libraries that have been honed for 15 years, like they're so much more capable. They're so much more robust. Like they have seen and been exposed in battle for a decade, and they are absolutely bulletproof, right? Like, and I think one of the reasons that there's like big debates about like how are technicians going to support software, things like that, is it's having to do with like the repercussions of everything being custom made, everything being a snowflake, everything being like it was programmed by a junior engineer who was on a deadline and he was already 6 weeks late. It's like, well, that's why we need everybody servicing it so much, because it's so poorly written, And again, I don't blame the engineers for that, right? Like it's just it has to do with, it's a systematic issue. And it's like if we thought about it differently, where it's like, we're going to do this, and we're going to deploy it to 100 machines, not one by one. What you can invest in that and the kind of quality you can get in that is so ridiculously higher, where it's like, you're able to, that's what it's about. So it's like a lot of the stuff that we've shipped to be like, no, it's battle hardened. It's not just the one, it's not just been done once, like it's been hundreds of times.
Do you feel like on like the creative side of things that like you guys have always had the ability to like, let's say, operate a camera, right? I always go with, that's a good example and a good like physical place to start. Because like, say for instance, like one thing you guys do a really good job at is like just your videoing, even if it's like simple, one of your sit on a couch type of videos, like the cuts and everything like that are done very nicely. That has that always kind of been something that was there? Or was there somebody on your team that had that background? Or
I think it's a good example of like how to experiment as like really as an entrepreneur, as a business person, because well, first of all, I did have experience, because like photography was a hobby for me, like since I was a kid, right? So I'm used. I've taken 100,000 photos with DSLRs. And because it was a hobby, it was something that was fun that I did. It was a creative outlet. Like I just like cameras are awesome. Like I was just like that. It was something I was into, but I never applied it at work, like for 10 years, and one day I remember we were doing a company event, and this was around the time where we're like, we should have marketing. Right. And I was like seeing what people were doing with video. I was like excited about, even just YouTube, stuff like that, like as a way of communicating what we're about. Right. And reaching people. And I remember talking to Carl, and we were doing a company event where we were going to like build a CNC machine kit together. Like we bought like a CNC machine kit from Avid, called CNC Router Parts at the time, just because it'd be fun, right? It's like a fun event. We'll like put this machine together as a team. It was like all hands kind of thing. And I was like, should I buy a GoPro? Like, is it okay if I buy a GoPro? Like it's like $400. I'm not sure if I should. I kind of want to maybe we'll make a video of it. Like, and Carl was like, well, if it'll be fun, like just do it, and maybe if I had tried that, I would have lost $400 because like nothing ever came of it. Right. And that would have, okay, that was survivable. But like, I took that and I made a video, and I was like, because I wanted to play around with it. It was interesting to me. It was a creative outlet. It was relevant to the business, but it's also fun. It's something I wanted to learn. And so I made a video of us doing that. And like, you can go scroll all the way back to the beginning of our YouTube page and you can find that video. I can't watch it right now because it's so bad. But basically the first step was like, I just like, maybe I'll try this, I'll spend $400 on the camera. I'll spend like a few days or maybe a week of my time, like learning Final Cut and like doing editing. And you can see how, again, it's of no comparison to now, but the point being like, I'll just try it.
Yeah.
Right? I'll just try it. And I was like, that was fun. And then I was like, on my next video, I don't, I'm going to try this, and on the next one, I'm going to do this next one. And like, it was that kind of thing. And then I started getting Allison involved, and she was working with me on the unbox video series, which we did like 150 of those. And in the meantime, I was like, I'll buy a better camera. Actually, it sounds not too good. I'm going to see what's the deal with sound. Like, I'm like, Google how to make sound better. Like, oh, I should buy a real microphone. What about light? Like, so it's just like step by step, like very gradual, like just trying stuff. Like, this feels good. I like it. And people, again, we would have some views, but like, it wasn't like all of a sudden we were like winning giant contracts because we were like unboxing stuff on a video. It's like, it's just really interesting. And it was fun. And I could tell, I could feel it. I was like, we're communicating something important, like, and it's fun. Like, we'll keep doing it. And over time, it was like, it used to take like an hour to like shoot one unbox video. And then I would sit there for like 4 hours and edit it. And as we practiced, it got to be like, that only took 15 minutes. And then we're like, oh, we've done a bunch of these. Like, let's just throw it to an editor, be like, here's the footage, like make a, do the 30th one. Yeah. And we got to the point where we could shoot like 4 of them in an hour and just like throw it to the editor. And then we have 4 of them, it's like, and we built on that. And then we like started getting other people involved in the company because we were seeing like people responding to it. And then, at this point, we've got a full-time filmmaker on our staff. We have a bunch of people who have like learned Final Cut. We have a ridiculous amount of camera gear, which is so fun. Yeah. And, it's like, we built that really gradually over time. It wasn't just like 0 to 100, like people just see the one that we did yesterday or like the greatest stuff we ever did, like I'm super proud of the Ship in 6 video that we just shipped, by the way, which is a really big project, really, really unbelievable compared to like where we were a few years ago. But that was just from practicing and growing it over time and taking little bets, like try this, try that, feels good, keep doing it. That was how we did it, was like really gradually with what we had on hand at the time, and really getting comfortable, just like, I'll just put it out, just ship it, see what happens.
Yeah, I think definitely those things, like they kind of sculpt over time. That's a huge part of it, and people don't see that. Like there's even things like I do for the company, or we do as a company, and then like kind of don't even realize that we're doing whatever that thing is that's leading up to the just being this phenomenal thing. Like people, like, say for instance, like everything that's set up on the manufacturing come up and like its appearance and everything like that, like that, all that stuff, it came kind of quickly to us. Like we got the thing like launched and all the artwork and all that stuff in like a couple of weeks, but it came because we were already doing like other things prior to that were just like creative pieces. So like for us, all we just need to know is like, okay, we need to be at this ratio. We need to do like this. We probably need to, it's just like a matter of moving some things around and kind of finalizing things. And,
it reminds me that when we started working with our marketing and brand companies, and one in particular, Kinesis, shout out to Kinesis, because they've helped us so much. They helped us rename the company at one point. Why was I saying that? Like they talked to me about, or they taught us about this idea of like archetypes, of like, in every human story, there's like these 12 types of characters, and like sort of like as a way of as a communication tool, you can which character is Luke most like. Yeah. And one of those archetypes was a magician, and they're like, you guys are like magicians, and this is part of like when they tell you that, you're like, oh, I know how to. We're magicians. Like I can think about it in those terms. And the thing about magicians, you see people doing card tricks, like you have no idea how long they practice that to get that good at it. You know what I mean? Like it's invisible. You just see them like, boom, they make a rabbit appear, and you're like, how in the hell did they do that? Like, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is like that, where it's like you just don't see like all the work and practice for years that went into it. It just looks effortless,
Yeah.
and that's just how it works, So it's like I don't mind the mystery, or like, but that's real. That's true. What happens? Like it doesn't start that way. It takes a long time to develop the skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So I pulled up our thing. Like one of ours is musician.
Oh, you've done it too. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Royal. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of cool because like we didn't really, have those things like really defined, and I think we could still have them defined much better. But it's kind of cool that like there's a whole sector, there's a whole like team of individuals who are like good at that, and like are able to help like really extract like what your messaging is and like what your core values are, and
totally
in a way that you can kind of convey a story.
Yeah, it was amazing to talk for like a day, and then to have that people come back and be like, here's what we heard, and you're like, that is incredible that you can do that. It's just that they're able to crystallize and compress all that, and they understand like how to tell stories in a way that they can be transmitted from person to person. Like I was never taught that as an engineer. Like I was taught other things, and so that it's there's practice. There's like all of human history has been practice of storytelling. They know how to do that, and it's really fun to put that together and learn about it and use it as a tool.
A lot of times it's pretty common for an engineer to not be like the best creative individual, and to be, very like mathematical and science driven.
Correct. And they're taught to not make mistakes. And so like their ideas about risk, like they think it's really, they can feel really irresponsible and risky. I think what I've thought about in the meantime is like, actually it's just a more complicated risk statistics. It's like, there's just a different payout function. It's like we can be wrong most of the time and still like grow like crazy and come out ahead. Like we're going to do that by trying stuff that usually is not going to work, but like, and so that engineers hate that, right? They're taught that their value is to be correct and not make mistakes. Like creative people and artists are not taught that. They're taught to proceed with that anyway. So like it can be difficult for people kind of in that headspace to be that loose or to take that kind of risk because of what it means to them personally. Like that's personal for them about like just uncomfortable, not used to it.
As far as a loop and like creating content and like a media platform, do you guys have any type of projections on what you plan on doing? Well,
it was just late last year that we added, it had been kind of a dream to have like a full-time like video filmmaker person on our staff. And we also have people that help on the media and sort of like the distribution side of it, like what platforms is going on, like all the statistics, stuff like that. So like just to have that engine of like, we can come up with an idea and build that. And I can be involved in sort of like the vision of it and that aspect, and then have like a whole crew going like, here's the initial edits. Like here, what do we, like that's really, really powerful. And, but we were never doing it from like a goal point of view or like trying to reach. I mean, I would love to have more followers. So everybody watching, please follow me on LinkedIn. But that aspect, it was more about like building stuff that we were excited about and that people were responding to. A lot of what we have done in the last few years has been really what I would describe as just sort of like general brand stuff. Like it's mostly not clear what Loop does. Like that people are like, how do you have all these fancy engineers and cool facilities and what do you even do? And that's because we were all doing like core values messaging really on purpose. And now it's like, we're starting to do more, like we just released this Ship in 6 video. It's like, by the way, like, this is what we do professionally. Like, this is the kind of work we do. Here's what's cool about it. Like, you should hire us for that type of work. So like, we're doing more like practical media around, here's what's cool about our engineering services and, call us, let's talk about collaborating. Like, so there's a lot of that we're doing that's more, concrete and like more, I guess it has more of like a direct purpose commercially or business wise.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can tell you, I don't have any regrets about that. It's just like something more that we're like bringing a focus to, because when we do a lot of that brand messaging that's real, we have, like, if you talk about candidates or you talk about hiring, we'll post a job description and people will be like, I've never heard of Loop before. And they like go to our YouTube page. Like, and the people that we're hiring are like, I stayed up all night watching all your YouTube videos because of how cool your company looks. I can't believe, and they're not saying that to out of some, like, that's true. I can tell that it's true, right? Like, and they're sincere, and it's like, yeah, you're aligned. We're aligned. Like, you like what we're doing, like, and that's a big part of, like, you get it, and if we have a lot of people show up here that get it, like, we're going to be doing it even better. So even that stuff is like really powerful to keep doing more of, and working with other artists or like sharing more about a workshop. Like, those are the kind of things that I'm excited to do video wise. And we do mostly on LinkedIn, like, is where we put the most attention. I'd like to do more on YouTube. I'd like to do more on TikTok, because I think there's a big opportunity there, to kind of reach new people that, and again, every platform, even though it's just like all video, it's totally different. It's totally different what will go on LinkedIn, what will go on YouTube, what will go on TikTok. Like, to some degree you can like repackage, but like every medium is like really different in terms of how it works. So too.
Like a couple, so like I just did like a speaking engagement yesterday, and one of the things that got brought up is some of the marketing styles, and like, so say for instance, like, as far as like the content, like one of the things that I think is a good strategy, and what we do is we have like maybe like 10%, maybe 15% that are just like brand awareness, which is like, they almost don't have a purpose. They don't have a purpose. They're just kind of like, hey, we exist. Like, there's not even really any major platform or anything like that on it. Maybe it's like, mention stuff about happy holidays or whatever. It could be whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then we try to do like about 80% that's educational, right?
Learning.
So it isn't really saying exactly what we do, but we're trying to, like, it's like being that subject matter expert, but just providing value, right? There's no sell, there's no nothing like this. Hey, do you know about robotics or robotic welding? Okay, what do you know about it? Okay, well, here are some things.
That's really powerful. That's really powerful, and like not trying to sell, because the point is to attract your community, right? The point is to connect with the people who are like-minded, and to be, I mean, that's the thing about so much video content, or like what I would see as like more traditional, like if you just think about, like, I guess what I describe as old school, like the kind of trade show and, by the book marketing approach is all just like talking. It's like really salesy. It's like, it's not interesting. It's not engaging. It's not entertaining. Like, so much of what we're doing that I'm excited about is like, you can package like really valuable like information about, like, this was someone's like, I really appreciate that I learned that from Elite or from Loop. It's like, by the way, it only took 3 minutes and it was entertaining and visually interesting. And it wasn't like, if you compare that to like, hey, come to my lunch and learn, and I'm going to give you PowerPoint for an hour. It's like, that's what you're competing against, basically. And it's like, it's not a competition at all. And then people are like, when it's the right time and the right person for them to call you, like, they will call you because they've seen 100 of your videos. Like, that's my attitude about it for sure. And the right people will know when to call you. If you're doing that kind of communication work, right? So I put a lot of faith in that, which is why I don't feel like it's that important to be salesy. I mean, it is important to know you can hire us in these ways. Right. This is the way we do. And which again, is the part we're getting to, but like, for people to be like, I want to be a part of this, or like, I see what you're doing, I think it's cool. Like, we're just sharing that kind of mentality, and attracting like-minded people who are like, care about innovation, care about revolution, want to bring the industry forward. Like, all those people, I know that they see our stuff.
People don't mind seeing that stuff too, because as soon as they realize there's nothing salesy about it, like as soon as they see that there's not an app, it's like they're more acceptable to that information and they want to see it again.
Totally. Well, yeah. I mean, a buddy of mine, Sean, he was talking about, we were going into a meeting together, like an in-person meeting, and he was like, we'll go in unarmed, and he meant with no PowerPoint. Like, we'll just have a conversation, right? Like, and because like the best sales conversation, certainly for companies like ours that are like workshop or problem solving focus, is like, maybe there's a way to collaborate. If not, maybe I know who you should talk to. Like, that's all we're doing here. Like, it's not, there's no convincing involved. It's that's a sign we're on the wrong track if there's any kind of convincing that needs to take place. Like, we're either aligned and we're the right people to work together, or not. And if not, no big deal. Like, we've got plenty of work to do. That's such a cool attitude to have, and it's safer for people. People recognize rightly that they're not going to be manipulated or taken advantage of in that context.
I don't want to say that system integration is bad about it, but system integration it really has two sides, where like you have a side where there's partnership, and you have side of like that there's companies that they have to protect themselves because they're selling one system that has $1 amount associated with it, so they have to be careful on how they spend their labor and time. But then you have on the other side, like maybe the customer, maybe they're either asking for things that were not included in the scope, or the things that were included in the scope weren't actually provided. And then so there's like a friction that you'll have there, and I think there's a lot of that goes on in the industry because of like it's the business model of the systems integrator versus the business model of like the manufacturer, and also like the procurement of that equipment. Like they're looking at that as a CapEx purchase. They expect to get all these items listed that were part of the original purchase, and then there's always ambiguity because there's engineering stuff, right? Like there's like, well, I thought you were gonna have this alarm or that button or whatever, right?
Totally. So much of our processes are around like how to manage that uncertainty and complexity and risk, really for both sides. Like the reason why we do ship in 6 with 6-week sprints is that, the worst blow up that either side could experience is like 6 weeks, which is nothing compared to like some death march. We've all worked on them. Like this is never gonna, we're never gonna hit production rate on this thing, and we've been at it for 2 years. And we're all underwater and like barely survive. You know what I mean? Like how do we? That's not good for anybody. It's not good. It's not good for the customer. It's not good for the SI suppliers. I think yeah, but especially when it's really back to sales conversations. Like there's no need to be thirsty about it. Like that's just, it doesn't. And if your company's in that position, like you needed to pay the bills, or you're like really hungry for project work, like I respect that, but at the same time, it's like I don't think that's where the right kind of work comes from. That's like the danger zone, for that situation. That would get you into situations that make it worse, not better.
Yeah, and like that was kind of what I was getting to as well. Is like we're very focused on partnership related customers, and going into it like we'll advise customers don't cut us the whole PO, cut an R&D portion of this PO. And to be honest, it's less risky for you. It's less risky for us. Like, let's go into an R&D phase of this. Let's see if the thing will actually work, meet cycle time, and you're not going to run into complications with handling this part. And I think that the customers, they really like that. They see the value in that, and that they could take a lower investment to prove the thing out.
And you're aligned at that point, because if it's like, if it works, great. If not, we took our best shot at it, and we now we know. Otherwise, you're an SI, and you're taking a $500,000 bet that you're going to get $1 million at the end, and that's high stakes. And again, that's how a lot of SIs have lived, and they somehow get by, but a lot of them blow up for that reason. It's just, you take the wrong project and you're done.
Yeah.
Like that can happen when you're signing up for those kind of like infinite liability for like a fixed amount of upside.
I think that's like one of the things you see with integration is like I don't talk about this a lot, but like integration it's a difficult sector because it's like you really have like one or two things. You have like your big companies that have found ways to either be really good partners or be able to like say, no, look, this is where we're drawing the line. So you kind of have like those two things, or a combination of those things. I'm sure it's not just one or the other, but and then you have the smaller companies, which whenever you're a smaller company, I don't want to say like it's inevitable, but it is fairly inevitable. At some point in time, there's going to be a project that doesn't go well enough that simply kind of closes the doors, right? If you don't,
right.
I think a system integration company can really only survive long term with growth or stacking cash in the bank.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have some thoughts about this, and again, we're not really an SI. Like to be clear, like we really do control software, like, and that's our specialty, and it has been for a while. But of course I have opinions about it, but I think it's kind of like, it's a project business, so it's like being a general contractor, and how many horror stories about like they got to sell the next job so they can afford to finish the last one that they did. It's like, that's a really dangerous cycle to get into, both for you and your customers, and it's like, it creates a lot of nasty dynamics. So it's like figuring out how to align those interests and really make it safer for both sides. Like that's a big part of what I think SI should be pursuing. And some of them just have scale, but then they get scale, and like maybe they can't take as many risks because I don't know, they already got the engine running, or they're just doing something, they can't be as aggressive in different ways. So that's really the puzzle, because I think there's a lot of good work to be done, but how do we align those incentives instead of just like churning through SIs? It's like they have a reputation for that kind of business or that kind of volatility, because of that dynamic.
David, do you have any last pieces of advice for those who are career seeking, or those who are maybe looking to become entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think I've been talking about it, but like creativity means just trying things and seeing what happens. I think that applies for, people's career, applies in entrepreneurship, and you got to go do things to learn what's real and what's happening, and doing that in a way that is safe and that you can survive with, whether you're working another job and it's a side gig, or whether you're just trying something out. It's like, how do you survive to keep trying new things? How do you survive to take another bet tomorrow, fight tomorrow? That's step one. And then from there, you can really build on that, because the stuff that works is really valuable, even if it takes a lot of at-bats. So that kind of confidence to try things, you're not going to think your way out of it. You're not going to think your way to that. You got to go do stuff and see what happens.
I think it's definitely valuable. I think it's a take I haven't really heard expressed a lot. So I think it's a very good, valuable tip to anybody, especially those who are trying to do a little bit different things in life and try to take some risks. And
well, it's like, what can I afford to play with, where if it doesn't work out, I'm okay. And again, you can be in really desperate situations and still, okay, well, I'm still here, and you can build on that in a big way. So it's like, even if that's just let me go take a class, like let me go have lunch with somebody, it's an hour, maybe it doesn't come to anything, but it's like, you could afford to try it, and you're not going to be going broke, or you're able to keep doing it. You're able to survive. You're able to pay your rent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
David, where can people find you at?
Best way to find me is on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn, David Nichols at Loop, Loupe. And I would love to hear from everybody, especially the people who are saying hell yeah, or the people who are like, I'm wrong and I'm bad. I'm also happy to hear that feedback. So come at me if you need to. LinkedIn would be the best. Thanks a lot for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for being here, David.
Yeah. Thanks, man.